the train to nowhere. Clara sat on the cold metal bench at the edge of the platform, pulling her jacket tighter around her. The night air was biting, far too cold for early autumn. The station was nearly empty, lit only by a few dim overhead lights that buzzed faintly. A single train schedule hung from the wall, the ink faded and smudged. The only train listed was at 11:45 p.m., a time that hadn't changed in years, according to the station clerk. She checked her phone. 11:38 p.m. No signal. Figures. This station was practically in the middle of nowhere, too far from the city for decent reception, but close enough to feel like it should have been connected. Clara glanced down the tracks, but the tunnel beyond the platform was nothing but a dark void. A gust of wind swept through the station, and a soft sound carried on the air distant at first, then louder, a low, rhythmic clacking sound. A train. Finally, a headlight pierced the tunnel's darkness, and the train slid into view, moving too smoothly for something so old. The metal exterior was weathered and rusted, the windows dirty and fogged. As it slowed to a stop, the doors slid open with a hiss. Clara hesitated. The train looked wrong, but her options were limited. Her car had broken down 5 miles back, her phone was dead, and she was in the middle of nowhere. She needed to get to town. Taking a breath, she stepped aboard. Inside, the train was dimly lit by yellow bulbs strung along the ceiling. The floor was sticky beneath her feet, and the air had a strange metallic tang. The seats were old-fashioned, dark red leather with brass armrests, but oddly pristine, like they'd been cleaned recently. There were other passengers, maybe a dozen of them scattered throughout the car. No one was speaking. No one was moving. Some stared out the grimy windows. Others sat with their hands folded in their laps, eyes shut. Clara moved down the aisle, feeling the weight of the passengers' eyes on her. No one smiled. No one even blinked. She slid into an empty seat near the back, setting her bag beside her. She exhaled. The train jerked into motion. Clara turned to the window, but the view outside was nothing but darkness. Not the usual blur of trees and lights from passing towns, just blackness. No landmarks. No sign of where they were going. She caught movement from the corner of her eye. A man sitting across the aisle. He was middle-aged, with slick-back hair and a thin mustache. He wore a tailored gray suit that seemed about 2 decades out of date. He was watching her. "First time on the line?" the man said, smiling faintly. Clara hesitated. Yeah, I didn't even know this route existed." The man's smile didn't widen, but his eyes darkened. "It exists," Clara swallowed. "Where does it go?" Clara hesitated. Yeah, I didn't even know this route existed." The man's smile didn't widen, but his eyes darkened. "It exists," Clara swallowed. "Where does it go?" "Wherever it's meant to," the man said. He turned toward the window. "But it's not about the destination. It's about the journey." Clara frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" The man didn't answer. A woman's voice crackled over the intercom. "Next stop." Approaching, Clara sat up straighter, peering into the darkness beyond the glass. She saw nothing. The train slowed, but not in a normal way. It lurched like it had hit something solid. The lights overhead flickered. A woman's voice crackled over the intercom. "Next stop, Approaching. Clara sat up straighter, peering into the darkness beyond the glass. She saw nothing. The train slowed, but not in a normal way. It lurched like it had hit something solid. The lights overhead flickered. Clara's pulse quickened. No one else seemed alarmed. The passengers sat motionless, as though nothing unusual was happening. "What was that?" she asked the man across the aisle. The man smiled thinly. "The train, adjusting to the next stop. But nothing's out there." "Isn't there?" The man's smile widened. Clara stood. "I think I need to get off. You can't." Her breath hitched. "What do you mean?" The lights flickered again. A wet, slithering sound came from the next car. The man's eyes sharpened. "You shouldn't have gotten on." Clara moved toward the door. She pulled the emergency lever. It didn't budge. She tugged harder. Nothing. Next stop. Approaching. The train slowed. The windows darkened, as if the train were passing through a tunnel. The door at the end of the car rattled. A hand slapped against the glass. A dirty, blood-stained hand. Clara's breath hitched. A loud, dragging noise. Something was trying to open the door. The man in the gray suit stood. "It's too late now." "What's too late?" Clara demanded. The door buckled outward. The glass fractured. A figure stood beyond the door. Tall and thin. Its face was obscured by shadows, but she could see the outline of its mouth too wide. The other passengers stood as one. All of them turned toward the door. "You've arrived," the man in the gray suit said. The door crashed open, and the figure stepped into the train. A wave of cold rolled down the aisle. Clara stumbled backward. The figure's face moved into the light. Its eyes were hollow. Its skin hung in thin sheets from its skull. Its mouth stretched unnaturally wide. Clara screamed. The other passengers stared blankly as the figure moved down the aisle toward her. She turned and ran for the opposite end of the train, but the door there was sealed shut. The figure was closer now. Its mouth widened, revealing rows of jagged teeth. Clara threw herself at the nearest door, pounding on it. The train shook violently. The figure was right behind her. The lights cut out. Total darkness. Clara felt cold hands close around her arms. Then, darkness. The train was still moving when Clara woke up on the floor. The lights buzzed faintly. The other passengers were back in their seats. The door at the end of the car was whole. No glass was broken. No figure stood in the aisle. The man in the gray suit was sitting calmly across from her. "Welcome aboard," he said. Clara sat up, gasping. "What happened?" The man smiled. "You've passed the first test." "What test?" "The test to see if you'll stay." Clara's pulse thundered in her ears. "What do you mean, stay?" The train rocked beneath her feet. "We all had to pass it," the man said. "Now you're part of the line." Clara stood and stumbled toward the door. It didn't open. The man's smile sharpened. "This train doesn't stop until it reaches the end of the line." Clara's breath quickened. "Where's the end of the line?" The man's eyes darkened. "You'll see." The intercom crackled. Next stop approaching. Clara felt the train slow. She turned toward the window and saw nothing but blackness outside. The train shuddered. Clara braced herself as the door at the end of the car started to rattle. The figure was coming back, and this time she might not survive. Next stop approaching. The figure's hand pressed against the glass again. Long fingers splayed unnaturally wide, with nails far too sharp and far too dark. Behind it, Clara could barely make out its hollow eyes, empty, bottomless voids. Clara braced herself as the door at the end of the car started to rattle. The figure was coming back, and this time she might not survive. Its mouth twitched at the corners, stretching wider than humanly possible. Clara backed away toward the center of the car. "What the hell is that?" The man in the gray suit smiled faintly. "You'll get used to it." Clara's hands tightened into fists. "What are you talking about?" The man's eyes darkened. "It's part of the process." "The process?" Clara's pulse hammered against her skull. "What the hell is going on here? Where is this train going?" The man stood, brushing imaginary dust from his sleeve. "You shouldn't ask questions you aren't ready to hear the answers to." The door let out a metallic shriek. The figure's hand pushed further through the gap. Its skin peeled back, revealing raw muscle and bone beneath. Clara stumbled backward. Why is no one else reacting to this? The other passengers sat motionless. A woman in a dark dress stared straight ahead, her hands folded neatly in her lap. An old man by the window watched the glass, as though he could see something in the darkness outside. A teenage boy sat with his headphones on, tapping his fingers to music Clara couldn't hear. "They've all passed through the first phase," the man said. "They understand the rules." "What rules?" The man's smile widened. "Survive." A loud snap came from the door. The figure's mouth stretched open into a jagged black maw. Clara ran toward the opposite end of the car. The exit was still sealed shut. "Let me out," she screamed, slamming her fists against the door. "Let me off this train." The man in the gray suit sighed. "You can't leave, Clara." "How do you know my name?" The man's expression didn't change. "The train knows you." Clara turned back toward the other door. It was open now. The figure stood just beyond the threshold. It stepped into the car, the lights flickering overhead. Its long, emaciated frame seemed to ripple beneath loose, torn fabric that might have once been clothing. The stench of decay filled the air. Clara screamed as the figure lunged forward. She ducked beneath its outstretched arms and sprinted down the aisle. She shoved past the seated passengers, but none of them reacted. The figure's steps were slow, deliberate. A heavy, dragging sound followed it. Clara reached the next door. It was unlocked. She yanked it open and stumbled into the next car. This one was different. The seats were arranged in rows, but they were mismatched. Some looked brand new. Others appeared decades old, the fabric rotting and torn. The passengers were different, too. They sat with their heads tilted at odd angles, their faces blurred as though distorted by a heat wave. Clara backed toward the door. "I wouldn't go back," a voice said. She spun around. A girl was sitting in the row nearest the door. Dark hair, pale skin, maybe 17 or 18 years old. "What?" Clara asked. The girl tilted her head. "If you go back, it will find you." "What is it?" The girl smiled faintly. "You already know." Clara shook her head. "I don't understand any of this." You're not supposed to. The train shuddered violently. The figure was getting closer. Clara stumbled toward the girl. How do I get off this train? You don't, the girl said, but there has to be a way. The girl's eyes darkened. The train decides who gets off. Clara's breath hitched. That doesn't make sense. The girl's smile widened. It doesn't have to. A metallic screech echoed from the car behind them. The figure's hand appeared around the edge of the doorframe, nails digging into the metal. The girl stood. Time to run. She grabbed Clara's hand and pulled her down the aisle. The lights dimmed as they crossed into the next car. This car was worse. The walls were damp, streaked with rust and something darker. A foul stench hung in the air. The passengers were no longer sitting. They were hanging from the ceiling by twisted cords of metal and wire. Their faces were covered in cloth, but their bodies twitched as though they were alive. Clara stopped cold. What the hell is this? Don't look at them, the girl said. What happens if I do? You don't want to know. A groaning sound behind them. The figure was in the doorway. We have to go, the girl shouted. They sprinted down the aisle, ducking beneath the hanging bodies. Clara's heart hammered in her chest. The train jolted violently, throwing them against the wall. The girl dragged Clara to her feet. Through here. The girl shoved open the next door, and they stumbled into the next car. This one was empty, completely empty. No seats, no windows. Just a single spotlight illuminating the center of the car. The door behind them slammed shut. They were trapped. Clara turned toward the girl. What now? The girl's face had changed. Her eyes were hollow. Her mouth widened into an unnatural smile. You've made it this far, the girl said. But you're not done yet. The train shuddered violently. The lights cut out. Darkness. The figure's footsteps echoed toward them. Clara stumbled back toward the wall. What's happening? The girl's head tilted unnaturally. The train is testing you. The figure stepped into the spotlight. Its face was a jagged, warped mask of flesh and bone. Its hollow eyes locked onto Clara. Don't let it touch you, the girl whispered. Clara pressed herself against the wall. I can't stop it, the girl's voice sharpened. You have to. How? The girl's smile vanished. Give it what it wants. Clara's breath hitched. What does it want? You. The figure lunged forward. Clara screamed. The lights flashed. The train jolted. And then, silence. Clara opened her eyes. The figure was gone. She was back in a seat. The man in the gray suit sat across from her again, smiling faintly. Congratulations, he said. Clara's breath came in sharp bursts. What happened? You survived. The other passengers were back in their seats, sitting calmly. You're part of the line now, the man said. Clara shook her head. No, this isn't over. The man smiled. Oh, but it is. Clara stood and stumbled toward the door. It opened. Beyond it was a platform, dimly lit by flickering lights. Clara hesitated. The man's smile widened. Are you getting off? Clara's pulse hammered in her ears. She took a breath and stepped toward the platform. The man's smile faded. Clara stepped off the train. The doors slid shut behind her. She stood alone on the platform. The train began to pull away. Clara turned and saw that the platform stretched on forever in both directions. Behind her, a new train was already approaching. Clara stood frozen on the platform, her breath fogging in the cold air. The train she had just left was already disappearing into the shadows of the tunnel, the distant sound of its wheels on the tracks fading into silence. She turned toward the opposite end of the platform. A new train was already pulling in. It looked identical to the one she'd just escaped, the same dark exterior, the same grimy windows. But this time the doors didn't open. Clara hesitated. A hollow feeling settled in her chest. ... "Where am I?" she whispered. The platform stretched on endlessly in both directions. The only light came from the flickering overhead bulbs, casting long, trembling shadows across the concrete floor. There were no signs, no maps, no indication of where this place was or how to leave. A sound. Footsteps. Clara's head snapped toward the sound. A figure was approaching from the far end of the platform. At first it seemed human, a man in a long black coat, walking slowly toward her. But as he got closer, Clara saw that his face was pale and stretched too thin over his skull. His eyes were milky white, and his mouth curled into an unnatural smile. Clara backed away. "You don't want to stay here," the figure said. His voice was soft, almost gentle, but it echoed unnaturally in the empty space. "Who are you?" Clara demanded. The figure smiled wider, his two white teeth glinting beneath the flickering lights. "Just a messenger." "Messenger for who?" "For them." Behind the figure, shadows began to move. Forms emerged from the darkness at the edge of the platform, figures in tattered clothes, with hollow eyes and twisted smiles. Their heads tilted unnaturally as they shuffled forward. Clara's pulse hammered in her ears. "Stay away from me." The figure's smile widened. "It's too late for that." Clara turned and ran toward the opposite end of the platform. Her footsteps echoed in the emptiness. The new train sat silently beside her, its windows dark. The shadows were following her now, at least a dozen figures, walking unnaturally, their heads twitching with each step. Clara reached the far end of the platform and skidded to a stop, a wall, a dead end. The figures were closing in. Clara's breath hitched as her eyes darted toward the train. The doors were still closed, but then, hiss, the doors slid open. A figure in the black coat tilted his head. "It's your only option now." Clara's chest tightened. "What happens if I get back on the train?" The figure's smile vanished. "That depends on you." The figures were almost on her now. Their cold breath filled the air. Their hollow eyes gleamed in the flickering light. Clara lunged for the train and dove through the doors. They slid shut behind her. Clara lay on the floor, gasping for breath. The sound of scraping nails echoed from the platform outside. Slowly, she pushed herself to her feet. The train's interior was different this time. The seats were newer, the lights brighter, but something still felt wrong. She turned toward the far end of the car. A single passenger was seated near the back. It was the girl from before, the one with the dark hair and pale skin. "You made it," the girl said. Clara approached cautiously. "What's happening?" The girl's expression darkened. "The train accepted you." "Accepted me for what?" "You survived the first test." "Test?" Clara shook her head. "What kind of test is this?" The girl's eyes sharpened. "It's not over yet." Clara's pulse spiked. The train began to move. Outside the windows, the dark tunnel gave way to something even stranger. a swirling black void. Shapes twisted and shifted in the darkness, humanoid but incomplete, their limbs bending unnaturally. Clara sat down across from the girl. "Who are you?" The girl's eyes darkened. "Someone like you." "I'm not like you." The girl smiled faintly. "Not yet." The train shuddered violently. Clara grabbed the edge of the seat to keep from falling. Through the window, the swirling shapes outside were growing more defined. Faces, eyes. "What's happening?" Clara shouted. "The train is waking up," the girl said. Clara's breath hitched. "What does that mean?" "It means you're almost there." "Almost where?" The girl's smile faded. "Home." The train jolted hard enough to throw Clara from her seat. She hit the floor hard and groaned. A low rumbling sound filled the car. The lights flickered. From the far end of the car, the door slid open. The figure from the platform stepped inside. Clara's heart stopped. "No." "Wah." The figure smiled. "You're ready now." The girl didn't move. She just watched as the figure approached. Clara stumbled to her feet. "What are you talking about?" "You've already passed the first two phases," the figure said. "You've been accepted." "Oh?" "Accepted for what?" "For the train." Clara backed toward the window. "I want to get off." The figure's smile widened. "You can't." Clara's breath hitched. The train began to speed up. ... Outside the windows, the swirling shapes were pressing against the glass pale faces, jagged hands. Clara turned toward the girl. "Help me." The girl stood. "I told you, Clara, the train decides who stays." "And what happens if I stay?" The girl's dark eyes gleamed. "You become part of it." The windows splintered with a loud crack. Dark hands reached through the glass. Clara screamed. The figure stepped closer. "Let it happen." Clara turned toward the door. It was still open. She sprinted toward it. ... The figure lunged for her, but Clara dove through the door, landing hard in the next car. She scrambled to her feet and slammed the door behind her. Dark hands pressed against the glass. The figure's face twisted into a cruel grin. "You can't run forever." Clara stumbled down the aisle. This car was different. The walls were made of metal. The floor was grated. Steam hissed from unseen pipes beneath her feet. Ahead of her, the next door was slightly open. Clara pushed through it and stopped cold. The next car was a cavernous space filled with rows of seats, but the passengers weren't human. ... They were pale, skeletal forms with blackened eyes and gaping mouths. Some were strapped into their seats. Others floated above them, whispering incoherent phrases. Clara backed away. "What the hell is this?" "You're seeing the truth," the girl's voice said. Clara spun. The girl stood behind her now. "You're almost ready to join us," the girl said. "I'm not joining anything." "You don't have a choice anymore." Clara shook her head. "Why? Why me?" "Because you boarded the train," the girl said. A loud snap echoed through the car. The figure from before was emerging through the next door. Clara turned to run, but the pale passengers were rising from their seats. Dark hands reached for her. The girl's eyes darkened. "You can't outrun it anymore," Clara screamed. The train jolted violently. The lights cut out, and then silence. Clara's breath came in ragged gasps as she lay on the cold metal floor. The train had gone dark, leaving her surrounded by pitch blackness. The whispering voices had vanished, and for a moment she clung to the silence like a life raft. Then came the footsteps, slow, deliberate, each step clicking against the metal floor. The figure from before the one in the black coat was moving closer. "You can't run from this," his voice whispered through the dark. "You're already part of the train." Clara scrambled to her feet, feeling her way along the wall. Her fingers brushed against something cold to handle. "The door to the next car, please be unlocked." She yanked it open and stumbled through just as the footsteps reached her. The door slammed shut behind her. The new car was dimly lit by flickering ceiling lights. The air was thick and humid, heavy with the metallic scent of blood. Rows of passengers sat in twisted silence, their faces contorted in frozen screams. Some of them looked freshly deceased, others were skeel. Their empty black eyes seemed to follow her as she walked down the aisle. "Don't stop," Clara whispered to herself. "Just keep moving." She was halfway through the car when one of the bodies twitched. Clara froze. The figure, an old man with sunken cheeks and a ragged suit, turned his head toward her. His mouth stretched wide in a distorted grin. "Don't leave," the man gurgled. "Stay with us forever." Clara stumbled back as several more figures stirred in their seats. Their heads turned in unison, faces twisted with inhuman smiles. "Stay, stay, stay," they chanted in breathless whispers. One of them lunged, grabbing her wrist with icy fingers. "No!" Clara wrenched her arm free and ran, barely dodging the reaching hands. The next door was at the far end of the car, just beyond a cluster of standing passengers, ghostly figures that swayed unnaturally as they moved toward her. "I have to get out," Clara muttered. She ducked low, weaving between the grasping figures, and reached the door. Just as she grabbed the handle, hiss. The door wouldn't open. She turned back, the figures now closing in. "Let me through," she screamed, pounding her fists against the door. "You're wasting your time," a voice said behind her. Clara spun to see the young girl, the one with the pale skin and black eyes, standing just a few feet away. "You need to stop fighting," the girl said. "You can't escape." Clara's voice shook. "Why are you doing this?" "I told you," the girl said softly. "The train chooses who stays, and you've already been chosen." "Then why haven't I been taken yet?" Clara shot back. The girl's expression darkened. "Because the train's still deciding what to do with you." Suddenly the car jolted. The flickering lights stabilized, and for a moment Clara glimpsed something outside the window, a vast empty void swirling with distorted faces and jagged hands. "Where are we?" Clara demanded. The girl just smiled. "Wherever the train wants to go." Bang! The door behind Clara suddenly unlocked, sliding open with a mechanical groan. Without thinking, Clara bolted through. The new car was different. It looked like a dining car from the 1940s, complete with polished tables, leather booths, and warm candlelight. A handful of passengers sat quietly, their faces obscured by wide-brimmed hats and scarves. At the far end of the car, Clara saw him, the man in the black coat. He was waiting. "You can't run from this," he said. Clara stood frozen. "I'm not running." "Then you've accepted your fate." His grin widened. "No," Clara whispered. "I've accepted that I don't need to outrun you." She turned and grabbed one of the candles from a nearby table, hurling it onto the nearest seat. The flame ignited immediately, spreading like oil across the fabric. The man's smile faltered. "What are you doing?" "I'm burning this whole damn place down," Clara said, grabbing another candle. The passengers in the car began to stir, their movements jerky and unnatural. Several of them rose to their feet, mouths stretching into twisted grins. "You think fire will save you?" the man sneered. "It'll burn the train," Clara shot back. "And if the train dies?" "I'm guessing so do you." The man's smile vanished. His pale eyes darkened. "You don't understand what you're doing." "Oh, I think I do," Clara said. The flames roared higher, spreading from seat to seat. The dining car's polished walls blackened and cracked. "Stop her!" the man shouted. The shadowy passengers lunged toward Clara, but the fire was faster. Flames raced across the floor, cutting off their path. The man in the black coat let out a furious roar. His face twisted and distorted, his features warping into something inhuman. "You'll regret this," he hissed. "The train doesn't forget." The fire swallowed the walls, racing toward Clara. She turned and ran, dodging falling debris as smoke filled her lungs. Her vision blurred as she stumbled into the next car. The train shuddered violently. A terrible screech filled the air, metal grinding against metal, the sound of something massive being torn apart. Clara fell to the floor as the world seemed to tilt sideways. And then, crash. When Clara opened her eyes, she was lying on a cold concrete platform. The train was gone. The station was silent except for the faint sound of distant footsteps. Dizzy and coughing from smoke, Clara staggered to her feet. The twisted figures, the man in the black coat, everything was gone. "Clara!" a voice called Dot. She turned to see a man sprinting toward her. It was Danny, the friend she was supposed to meet hours ago. "Where the hell have you been?" Danny said, out of breath. "I've been looking for you all night." Clara stared at him in disbelief. "The train. There's no train here," Danny interrupted. "This station's been closed for years. No trains run here anymore." Clara's blood ran cold. "But I was on a train." Danny shook his head. "Whatever happened, you're safe now. Come on, let's get out of here." Clara turned back toward the empty tunnel. In the distance, she swore she saw a pair of pale eyes watching her. Clara never took public transportation again, but sometimes when she passed an empty train station at night, she would hear something, a distant rumble of wheels on tracks, and a voice whispering her name. The train wasn't finished with her. Not yet. The Ghost Collector. It was already dark by the time I pulled up to the house. It sat at the end of a long, winding driveway, flanked by ancient oak trees, whose branches curled inward like skeletal fingers. The house itself was massive, a sprawling Victorian mansion with weathered gray siding and tall windows that reflected nothing but the empty night. I cut the engine and sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles. My breath fogged the inside of the windshield. I didn't want to be here, but I needed the money. I took a deep breath, grabbed my bag from the passenger seat, and stepped out into the cold. The air was thick and heavy, like it was pressing down on me. A figure stood at the top of the wide stone steps leading to the front door, a woman in her early 60s, with sharp features and dark eyes. She wore a black dress that clung to her thin frame like it had been sewn onto her. "You must be Evelyn," she said as I climbed the steps. "Yeah, Evelyn Crowley." Her gaze drifted over me, calculating. "I was expecting someone older. I get that a lot?" She gave a tight smile and extended a thin hand. "Margaret Holloway. I own the house." I shook her hand. Her skin was cold as ice. "Shall we?" she said, gesturing toward the door. The front door creaked open beneath her hand, and I followed her inside. The entrance hall was massive. Dark wood paneling stretched up to a vaulted ceiling lined with carved beams. Dusty chandeliers hung above us, the crystals clouded and dull. Faded portraits lined the walls, family members maybe, but none of them looked happy. The air was heavy, wrong. It felt like walking into a tomb. Margaret walked ahead of me, her heels clicking against the polished floor. "The disturbances began 6 months ago," she said. "Voices at night, cold spots, unexplained noises." "Anyone been hurt?" She hesitated. "Not yet." We passed through an archway into a grand sitting room. A fireplace dominated one side of the room, cold and filled with ashes. Heavy red drapes covered the tall windows, shutting out the night. A young man sat in an armchair near the fireplace, his legs crossed. He looked up as we entered a sharp, angular face framed by dark hair. His eyes were cold and calculating. "This is my son, David," Margaret said. David rose and extended a hand. I shook it, and his grip was strong, but his eyes, something about them, made my skin crawl. "So," David said, "you're the one who's going to fix our little problem." "That's the idea," I said. He smiled thinly. "Good luck with that." Margaret shot him a sharp look. "David," he shrugged. "What? It's not like the others had any luck?" I frowned. "Others?" Margaret's lips tightened. "You weren't the first psychic I called." "How many others?" "3, David said. His eyes gleamed. "None of them lasted more than a night." "And what happened to them?" Margaret hesitated. "They left, quickly." "And you didn't think to mention that? Would it have made a difference?" I sighed. "Probably not." Margaret gestured toward the staircase. "I've had a room prepared for you upstairs, ... You'll want to rest before you begin your work tomorrow." I opened my mouth to argue, but Margaret was already walking away. David followed after her, his gaze lingering on me a moment too long before he disappeared into the shadows. The room was at the end of a long hallway on the second floor, dark wood walls, heavy curtains, a tall 4-poster bed. The sheets were crisp and cold beneath my fingers. A faint chill hung in the air. I set my bag down on the bed and began unpacking my tools, sage, candles, iron nails, salt, the essentials. As I worked, I felt it. A presence. Something was watching me. Slowly, I turned toward the window. A figure stood outside, barely visible through the glass. A woman, dressed in white, her hair loose and wild. Her face was pale and hollowed out, her eyes dark voids. She raised one hand and touched the glass with the tips of her fingers. I stepped toward the window, and she vanished. A knock at the door startled me. "Yeah?" David's voice drifted through the wood. "Dinner's ready. Thought you might be hungry." I hesitated before opening the door. David stood there, smiling faintly. "You okay?" he asked. "Just tired," I said. David's gaze flicked toward the window. Seen anything yet? I watched his expression carefully. Why do you ask? He smiled. Because you will. Dinner was uncomfortable. The dining room was massive, with a long mahogany table stretching nearly the length of the room. Candles flickered in tall silver holders, casting shifting shadows on the paneled walls. Margaret sat at the head of the table. David sat across from me. The food roast, chicken, vegetables, fresh bread tasted as lifeless as the house. So, David said, cutting into a slice of chicken, what's your plan? I set my fork down. First, I need to understand what I'm dealing with. The energy in this house feels old. Margaret's eyes sharpened. Old? Yes, and angry. David's smile widened. Good luck calming it down. I'll need to walk the house at night, I said. That's when the energy is strongest, and I need to know more about the house's history. Margaret hesitated. David's eyes gleamed. Why? I pressed. Because it matters, David said softly. Some things are better left buried. Margaret stood abruptly. You have everything you need, Miss Crowley. I suggest you get some rest. David laughed. Yeah, rest. That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Sleep didn't come easily. My mind replayed the image of the woman in white outside the window, the cold in her eyes, the emptiness. Somewhere down the hall, a door creaked. Footsteps followed, soft and careful. I sat up. Hello? The footsteps stopped. I got out of bed and grabbed the iron nails from my bag before stepping into the hallway. The air was cold. A thin layer of frost had gathered on the wood paneling. A shadow moved at the far end of the corridor. I walked toward it, my heartbeat hammering in my ears. A door stood open at the end of the hallway. The library. I stepped inside, and the door slammed shut behind me. The temperature dropped. My breath frosted the air. Shelves of books stretched toward the high ceiling. The fireplace was dark, and standing by the window was the woman in white. She turned slowly toward me. Her face was hollow and pale. Tears streamed from her empty eyes. Please, she whispered, help us. The temperature dropped again. I could feel something behind me, something cold and dark. You're trapped here? I whispered. She nodded. He won't let us leave. Who? Before she could answer, the temperature plummeted. The woman's eyes widened in terror. He's coming. The lights flickered. The shelves trembled. A deep voice echoed through the room. Leave her. The woman's face contorted in fear. A dark shape stepped out from the shadows behind me. You, the woman whispered. No. A cold hand closed around my wrist, and the last thing I heard before the world went dark was the sound of laughter. I woke to the feeling of cold hands wrapped around my wrists. My eyes snapped open, and I found myself lying on the cold floor of the library. My breath fogged the air, and the bitter chill gnawed at my skin. The woman in white was gone, but the dark figure that had appeared behind me in the library wasn't. It stood at the edge of the room, its face hidden beneath a deep black hood. I couldn't see its eyes, only the glint of teeth beneath the shadow of the hood. You shouldn't be here, it said. Its voice was low and deep, like it was echoing from the bottom of a well. I scrambled to my feet, backing away toward the far wall. My hands slid along the wood paneling, searching for a door, A hidden latch, anything. Who are you? I demanded. The figure took a slow step forward. You already know. I clenched my fists, grounding myself. You're the one keeping them here. The figure stopped. They chose to stay. Bullshit. It chuckled. The sound was low and distorted. Believe what you want. It changes nothing. It took another step toward me. Why are you doing this? I demanded. What do you want? The figure raised one pale hand, extending long, thin fingers toward me. Its voice was quiet now, almost tender to collect. I lunged toward the door, throwing all my weight against it. It wouldn't budge. You won't get out, the figure said. I reached into my pocket, my hand closing around the iron nail I'd brought with me. My fingers were so numb I could barely hold on to it. I turned and slammed the nail into the figure's chest. It screamed. The sound ripped through the room, shaking the shelves and sending books tumbling to the floor. The figure staggered back, clutching its chest. Dark smoke billowed from the wound. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I grabbed the door handle, twisted, and this time it opened. I stumbled into the hallway, slamming the door shut behind me. David was waiting for me. He stood in the dark hallway, hands tucked into the pockets of his slacks, a thin smile on his lips. Rough night? I pushed past him. Screw you. His smile widened. Did you meet him? I spun toward him. You knew? Of course I knew. I grabbed him by the collar of his shirt and shoved him against the wall. What the hell is going on in this house? David's smile didn't falter. You already know. I slammed him against the wall harder. You knew about him, about the ghosts, about all of it. What is he? David's eyes glinted. He's the collector. My breath hitched. David leaned toward me. And you? You've been invited to join him. My grip tightened on his collar. Why? Because you're strong, David said. Psychics like you're rare. He likes to keep things that are rare. I shoved him back and stepped away, shaking with anger. David's smile widened. You don't have to fight him. You could join him. There's power in that. Go to hell, I hissed. David's eyes darkened. I already have. I stormed downstairs, ignoring Margaret as she called my name from the drawing room. I grabbed my bag and headed for the front door. The knob wouldn't turn. I pulled harder. The lock wouldn't budge. A cold draft crawled over my skin, and I heard the low sound of distant laughter. You can't leave, Margaret said softly from the doorway. I turned toward her. What the hell is going on? Margaret's face was pale, and her hands trembled at her sides. You think you were hired to cleanse the house? She said. You weren't. You were brought here because he wants you. He feeds on power, on fear, and psychics like you are his favorite. Why the hell would you bring me here? Margaret's lips quivered. Because he lets us live. As long as we give him what he wants. I stared at her. You're feeding him? Margaret's eyes were hollow. I tried to stop it once. I failed. Now it's too late. Like hell it is, I said. That night I didn't sleep. I sat on the floor of my room, iron nails spread out in a circle around me. I lit a row of candles and began whispering an old Latin incantation under my breath. My grandmother had taught me how to bind spirits when I was young. She had also warned me about spirits that were too powerful to bind. This thing was one of them. I heard footsteps outside the door, slow, measured. I closed my eyes and focused my energy on the circle, strengthening the barrier. A low knock at the door. "Come in," I said. David entered. He leaned casually against the wall, his eyes gleaming in the candlelight. "What's the plan?" "Binding ritual." David chuckled. "You really think you can bind the collector?" "Guess we'll find out." David's smile widened. "You might be stronger than the others, but you're not stronger than him. Is that why you joined him?" David's smile flickered. "I didn't have a choice. I studied him. There's always a choice." David stepped toward me, his eyes darkening. "Not here." I held up a silver ring I had taken from my bag, a ring blessed with salt and iron. "Stand in the circle." David hesitated. "Why?" "Because I don't trust you," he smiled. "Smart." David stepped into the circle, and the second his foot crossed the threshold, he screamed. The iron and salt reacted to him like acid. His skin darkened and smoked. His face twisted in pain. What are you doing?" He screamed. I stood and crossed my arms. "You're already part of him, aren't you?" David's eyes went black. "You can't stop him," he hissed. I knelt down, my face inches from his. "Watch me." A wind howled through the room, and the candles blew out. The cold returned. The shadows in the corners of the room thickened, pooling together and forming a shape, a tall, hooded figure with gleaming white teeth beneath the dark shadow of its face. "Let him go." I rose to my feet. "No, he is mine." I raised a hand, pressing my fingers to David's forehead. "I bind you," I whispered. "I cut your ties to him." David screamed. His body convulsed. The collector's hooded head tilted. "This is a mistake." I closed my eyes, focusing my energy. David screamed one last time, then fell forward, unconscious. I took a shaky breath. "You're losing control," I said. The collector chuckled. "Am I?" And then he was gone. David lay unconscious at my feet. I knelt beside him, pressing 2 fingers to his neck. His pulse was strong, his breathing steady. But as I lifted his hand, I saw the mark burned into the skin of his palm. The collector wasn't finished. Later that night, as I sat beside David's unconscious body, Margaret entered the room. Her eyes were wide with fear. "What did you do?" "I freed him." Margaret shook her head. "No, you angered him." "He's been in control long enough," I said. David's eyes fluttered open. His gaze settled on me. "You really think you can beat him?" "I'm not going to beat him," I said. David's gaze sharpened. "Then what are you going to do?" I smiled faintly. "I'm going to destroy him." David sat across from me, his back pressed against the cold wall of the library. His eyes were open now, clear but hollow. He rubbed the mark on his palm, the dark, burned circle that pulsed faintly beneath his skin. "You don't understand what you've done," he said. I stared into the darkened room, the scattered remains of the broken circle at my feet. The candles were melted down to nubs. The salt was blackened. "I know exactly what I've done," I said. David shook his head. "No, you've made it worse." Margaret stood in the doorway, arms wrapped around herself, trembling. "He's awake now," she said softly, "completely awake." I turned toward her. "Then it's time we end this." David's mouth twisted, into a bitter smile. You don't end the collector. I pushed myself to my feet, ignoring the ache in my limbs. We'll see. We gathered in the dining room beneath the pale glow of the antique chandelier. Dust floated lazily in the air, disturbed only by the faint stir of a draft that crept through the cracks in the walls. Margaret sat stiffly at the head of the table, her eyes distant. David leaned back in his chair, rubbing his bruised wrists. "This house is more than haunted," I said, leaning my palms against the table. "The collector isn't just feeding on ghosts. He's making them." Margaret's face tightened. "We know. Then why haven't you stopped it?" David laughed bitterly. "You think no one's tried?" Margaret's gaze darkened. "He's part of the house. Part of us. You don't stop something like that." "Maybe you can't," I straightened. "But I can." David's eyes narrowed. "How?" "The collector is bound to this house because it's a tether, a source of power. If we break the tether..." Margaret's eyes widened. "You mean burn it down?" I nodded. "Destroy the house, destroy his hold on this place." David's jaw tightened. "It's not that simple. He's not just a spirit. He's older than this house, older than all of us. Older doesn't mean invincible." David sat forward. "You don't know what you're dealing with. You think you've seen his true face?" I met his gaze. "I'm counting on it." That night, I sat in the hallway outside the library, my back pressed against the cold wall. The house was quiet, too quiet. David sat beside me, arms crossed over his knees. "You really think this is going to work?" he asked. I didn't answer. "I don't know how you do it," he said. "How you don't let the fear get to you." "I do," I said softly. David's gaze sharpened. "Then why are you still here?" I hesitated. "Because if I leave, more people die. More ghosts are made." David's mouth curled into a thin smile. "You sound like him." I frowned. "What do you mean?" David leaned toward me. His eyes darkened. "The collector started as a protector, a psychic just like you. He tried to help the ghosts, tried to give them peace." "And what happened?" "He failed." David's eyes glinted coldly. "He started to believe that the only way to give them peace was to control them." I tensed. "That's not going to happen." David's gaze sharpened. "Isn't it?" Around midnight I heard the sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate. I rose to my feet. David stood beside me, his eyes dark. "He's coming," he whispered. I grabbed a handful of iron nails from my pocket and started down the hall. David followed close behind. We reached the drawing room just as the figure appeared at the far end of the hallway. The collector's hood was down this time. His face was pale and gaunt, his eyes hollow pits of blackness. His mouth curled into a grotesque smile. "You think you can stop me?" I forced my breathing to slow. "I don't think I know." The collector's head tilted. "You're more stubborn than the others, but you'll break eventually." I raised my hand. "Let them go." The collector's smile widened. "Or what?" "I'll burn this house to the ground." I pulled the lighter from my pocket. "Maybe, but even pawns can win sometimes." I flicked the flame to life and held it toward the heavy velvet curtain beside me. The collector's expression flickered just for a second into something that looked like fear. The collector's eyes darkened. "You would destroy them," he said. All the souls I've collected, they would be lost forever. They're already lost, I said. The collector's gaze sharpened. You think you're a savior? You're just another pawn. And then the curtain caught fire. The fire spread fast. The dry wood and ancient fabrics caught immediately, flames licking hungrily up the walls and along the ceiling. David grabbed my arm. We need to go. Not yet, I said. The collector's form shimmered in the heat, his face distorting into something grotesque. You think this will save them? He hissed. I stepped toward him, iron nails pressed into my palm. No, but it'll stop you. The collector's smile twisted into something monstrous. You are making a mistake. Good. I hurled the nails toward him. They struck his chest, and he screamed. His body convulsed and began to unravel dark smoke bleeding from his skin. The flames reached the ceiling, and a loud crack echoed through the house. Go, David shouted, pulling me toward the door. We ran. The house was collapsing around us. The floorboards buckled beneath our feet as we raced down the hall. The fire roared behind us, and the walls screamed with the sound of splintering wood and breaking glass. David shoved open the front door, and we stumbled out into the night. I hit the ground hard, gasping for breath. Behind me, the house blazed an inferno against the dark sky. David lay beside me, coughing. Did it work? He choked out. I sat up, looking toward the house. The flames raged higher, black smoke pouring into the night sky, and in the center of the flames I saw him, the collector. His eyes met mine, and then he was gone. The house collapsed in on itself with a final groan of wood and metal. David sat up, rubbing the back of his neck. Holy shit. Margaret ran toward us from across the lawn. Are you both okay? I stood slowly. I think so. Margaret's hands trembled. And the spirits? I shook my head. Gone, I think they're free now. David wiped his face. What about him? I stared at the smoldering remains of the house. I don't think we've seen the last of him, I said quietly. David stood beside me. So what now? I took a shaky breath. Now we wait. David's hand brushed against mine. His gaze darkened. You know he'll come back. I know. And when he does? I smiled faintly. Then we finish what we started. The fire raged behind us, the heat licking at the night sky. The remains of the house collapsed inward with a final, deafening groan of wood and metal. I sat on the cold grass, trembling. David was beside me, his breathing shallow and ragged. Margaret crouched over him, her hands hovering over his shoulder, like she wasn't sure if it was safe to touch him. We did it, Margaret whispered, her voice thin and hollow. David coughed weakly. Did we? I stared at the ruins of the house. Thick smoke curled up into the dark sky. Embers floated through the air like dying fireflies, and through the haze I swore I could still see his face. The collector, those hollow black eyes boring into mine. And that smile, I'm not sure, I said. David groaned and sat up, cradling his head. What happens now? I forced my breath to steady. We make sure it's over. Margaret drove us back into town. The car was silent, except for the occasional sound of David shifting in his seat, trying to find a position that didn't make his bruised ribs scream. I sat in the back, eyes locked on the rearview mirror. I kept expecting to see him there, the collector. But there was nothing, just the dark road and the distant lights of town. Margaret pulled up in front of a small motel. The sign flickered, casting pale green light onto the wet pavement. "I'll get a room," she said quietly. I helped David out of the car. He leaned heavily on my shoulder, wincing. "You sure this is over?" he asked. "No," I said, "but it's not your problem anymore." David's eyes darkened. "It is if he comes back." I didn't argue. Margaret returned with a key, her hand trembling as she held it out to me. Room 12. I guided David toward the room. Margaret followed, her eyes darting toward the shadows at the edge of the parking lot. Once inside, I helped David onto the bed. He hissed as he sat down, clutching his side. "You're lucky nothing's broken," I said, sitting down beside him. David gave me a crooked smile. "Lucky isn't the word I'd use." I pulled the iron nails from my jacket pocket and spread them across the knitstand. "Just in case." David frowned. "You really think he's still out there?" I didn't answer. Margaret stood by the window, peering through the curtain. "So what happens if he survived?" "He'll try again," I said. David's face darkened. "And if he does?" "Then we finish it." I woke up to the sound of breathing, soft, ragged, close. My eyes snapped open. David was asleep beside me, his chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. Margaret was curled up in the chair by the window, but someone else was in the room. I sat up slowly, heart thudding in my ears. The room was dark, except for the faint green glow of the motel sign through the thin curtains. A shadow moved in the corner. I reached for the iron nails. "Don't." The voice was soft, almost childlike. I froze. The shadow moved closer. A thin figure stepped into the pale green light. It was a girl, no older than 8 or 9. She wore a pale white nightgown, her bare feet leaving wet footprints on the carpet. Her eyes were wide and glassy. "Who are you?" I asked. The girl didn't answer. She tilted her head to the side. "You woke him up." My heart turned to ice. "What do you mean?" Her eyes darkened. "You set him free." I stood slowly. "That's not possible." The girl smiled faintly. "Isn't it?" David stirred beside me, groaning. Margaret sat up in the chair, her eyes narrowing. "Who are you talking to?" The girl's gaze sharpened. "You thought destroying the house would stop him," she said. "But the house wasn't his prison." I swallowed hard. Then what was? The girl stepped closer. "You." David sat up. "What the hell is she talking about?" The girl's smile widened. "He's in you now," she whispered. I stumbled back. "No, that's not." "You let him in when you touched him, when you stood in the circle." "No." The girl's eyes darkened into black voids. "He's part of you now." I ran to the bathroom and flipped on the light. My face stared back at me in the mirror pale, eyes wide and bloodshot. I lifted my hand. The burn mark on my palm was darker now, the edges pulsing faintly. "No?" David appeared behind me. "What's going on?" I shook my head. "It's not possible." David grabbed my wrist, pulling my hand toward him. His eyes widened. "Shit." I stumbled backward. "No, we burned it down. We destroyed him." David's face tightened. Maybe that wasn't enough. The girl's voice drifted from the other room. "He's awake now." I stepped toward her. How do I stop it? The girl's black eyes gleamed. You don't. David stepped between us. Like hell. The girl's mouth twisted into a dark smile. You think you're stronger than him? David's hand tightened around my wrist. She's stronger than you. The girl's face twisted, her mouth curling unnaturally wide. He's already in her mind. Then I'll tear him out, David growled. The girl's face twisted violently, and then she vanished, evaporating into thin smoke. That night, I lay awake in the dark. David sat on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. Margaret paced near the window. You okay? David asked softly. I don't know, I said. David's eyes darkened. If he's still inside you, I'll fight it. David's hand brushed mine. What if you lose? I won't. David didn't look convinced. Margaret sat down across from me. We need to end this. How? David asked. Margaret's gaze sharpened. We find out where he came from. David frowned. The house is gone. Margaret shook her head. The house wasn't his prison. If he's inside her now, we have to find the source. David's eyes narrowed. The source of what? Margaret's face darkened. Whatever made him. The next morning we left the motel. David loaded the car. Margaret stood by the road, arms crossed. I slid into the back seat, rubbing my palm. The burn pulsed beneath my skin. You okay? David asked, climbing in beside me. I forced a smile. Sure. David's eyes narrowed. You don't have to do this alone, he said. I squeezed his hand. I know. Margaret slid into the driver's seat and started the engine. Where to? David asked. Margaret glanced at me in the rear-view mirror. The source, David frowned. And if we find it? I smiled faintly. Then we end this. As the car rolled onto the highway, I stared out the window. In the reflection, I saw my own eyes, and for a brief moment, just a second, I saw them flicker black. The train to nowhere. Clara sat on the cold metal bench at the edge of the platform, pulling her jacket tighter around her. The night air was biting, far too cold for early autumn. The station was nearly empty, lit only by a few dim overhead lights that buzzed faintly. Emily Baker had always found comfort in the controlled chaos of the hospital. The rhythmic beep of monitors, the scent of antiseptic, the hurried footsteps of nurses, it was familiar, grounding. But the atmosphere inside St. Augustine Memorial had shifted in the last week. The hospital had been placed under a strict lockdown after an outbreak of an unidentified virus. The CDC had been involved from the beginning, but no one knew exactly what they were dealing with. The symptoms were strange and inconsistent fever, hallucinations, blackened veins under the skin, and patients who seemed to be recovering would suddenly deteriorate overnight. Some never woke up. Emily had been working double shifts since the outbreak started. The staff was stretched thin. Doctors were working around the clock, and some of the other nurses had started showing signs of fatigue and illness themselves. The hospital's fourth floor had been converted into an isolation wing. Emily was stationed there, along with two other nurses, Julia and Ben, and a rotating team of doctors. The patients in isolation were kept behind glass walls, hooked up to oxygen and heart monitors. That night, Emily was sitting at the nurse's station, reviewing a patient chart when she heard its slow footsteps echoing down the hallway. Her eyes lifted toward the corridor. The lights were dim, casting long shadows across the polished linoleum floor. "Julia?" Emily called out. No answer. The footsteps stopped. Emily stood up, her heart picking up speed. She walked toward the sound, her sneakers making soft squeaks on the floor, and then she saw it. A figure standing at the end of the hallway, tall, slender, and dressed in black robes. A long beaked mask covered its face white and smooth, the empty eye sockets fixed directly on her. Emily froze. "Sir, you're not allowed to be here," she said, her voice steady despite the icy fear creeping through her chest. The figure didn't respond. It stood motionless, the long beak pointed toward her like the barrel of a gun. Emily took a cautious step forward. "If you don't leave, I'm going to call security." The figure's head tilted slightly. Then it turned and drifted silently down the hallway, disappearing around a corner. Emily hurried to the nurse's station and hit the intercom button. "Security, we have a possible intruder on the 4th floor." Minutes later, Ben appeared, his dark hair sticking up at odd angles. "What's going on?" "Somebody was here," Emily said, breathless, "wearing a plague doctor mask." Ben raised an eyebrow. "You sure you weren't just imagining it? You've been running on fumes for days." "It wasn't my imagination," Emily snapped. "It was real." He was standing right there. Ben sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Well, security says they didn't find anyone. If it was some patient trying to sneak out, they'll check the cameras." Emily sat down, trying to steady her breathing. "It wasn't a patient," she said. "It wasn't." 3 hours later, Emily was checking on Mr. Hanley, one of the isolation patients. He was a frail older man with thinning white hair and sunken eyes. His vitals had been stable earlier in the day, but now his oxygen levels were dropping. His breathing was shallow, and his skin had taken on a grayish hue. She adjusted his mask and checked the 4-line. His heart monitor beeped steadily, but it was slower than it should have been. Suddenly, Mr. Hanley's eyes fluttered open. His pupils were wide, the whites of his eyes bloodshot. He reached up, his hand weak but grasping for her wrist. "Please," he whispered, "don't let him take me." Emily's heart skipped a beat. "Who? Who's trying to take you?" "The doctor," he wheezed. "He's already here." The heart monitor beeped faster. Mr. Hanley's eyes widened in terror, and then his gaze shifted toward the door behind Emily. Emily turned slowly. The plague doctor was standing just inside the room. Emily stumbled back, slamming her hand on the emergency call button. The figure didn't move, but it radiated malice, something dark and ancient. Mr. Hanley's body seized violently, his back arching off the bed as he let out a final, strangled gasp. His heart monitor flatlined. The plague doctor lifted a gloved hand toward Mr. Hanley's body. Emily watched in paralyzed horror as dark tendrils of shadow seemed to rise from the old man's mouth, drifting toward the figure's outstretched hand. The figure absorbed the dark mist into its palm, and then it vanished. Emily ran into the hallway, nearly colliding with Ben and Julia as they rushed toward the room. "Mr. Hanley, he's gone. He just—" Ben moved to the bed, checking for a pulse. "He's dead," Ben said grimly. "I saw him," Emily whispered. "The plague doctor. He was in there. Emily, Julia said carefully, you've been under a lot of stress. Maybe you were... I'm not imagining this. Emily shouted. I saw him take something from Mr. Hanley, like his soul. Ben and Julia exchanged worried looks. Suddenly the intercom crackled to life. Code blue. Room 409. Code blue. That's Mrs. Lanning, Julia gasped. They ran down the hall toward the next isolation room. Mrs. Lanning was convulsing in her bed, her heart monitor screaming in alarm. Her body arched as her breathing became ragged. Emily saw him again. The plague doctor stood just outside the window, his black eyes fixed on Mrs. Lanning. Emily raced toward the door and pulled it open. Get away from her. The figure didn't move. Ben, help her, Emily shouted. Ben ran to Mrs. Lanning's side, trying to steady her as Julia prepped the crash cart. Emily stormed toward the plague doctor. Stop this. You're killing them. The figure's head tilted. I'm not killing them, it said, voice deep and cold. I'm collecting them. Emily lunged for him, but her hands passed straight through the fabric of his cloak. He began to dissolve into shadows, fading into the air as Mrs. Lanning's body stilled. The monitor flatlined. Julia began compressions. Come on. But Mrs. Lanning was gone. The plague doctor's final words whispered through the room as he vanished. This is only the beginning. That night, Emily sat alone in the staff lounge, hands trembling. 2 patients were dead. There was no explanation. Her phone buzzed on the table. A message from an unknown number. Emily opened it. It was a photo, grainy and dark, but clearly showing the 4th floor hallway. In the background, partially hidden by shadows, stood the plague doctor. Below the photo was a single line of text. He's not done. Emily couldn't sleep. After what happened to Mr. Hanley and Mrs. Lanning, the hospital had gone into full lockdown. Security was stationed at every entrance, and the administration had ordered all non-essential personnel to leave. But Emily couldn't leave. Not now. 2 patients were dead. And whatever that thing was, it wasn't finished. She sat in the dimly lit break room, clutching her phone in one hand, staring at the grainy photo of the plague doctor standing in the hallway. Her thumb hovered over the delete button, but she couldn't bring herself to press it. Deleting it would mean admitting it never happened. Ben walked in, his scrubs wrinkled in dark circles beneath his eyes. He grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge and sat down across from her. You still thinking about it? He asked. You saw him too, Emily said. I know you did. Ben hesitated. I don't know what I saw. Emily's hands clenched around her phone. It wasn't a hallucination, Ben. I know how it sounds, but that thing, it took something from them, their souls. Ben rubbed his face, sighing. Emily, you've been working 16-hour shifts. Maybe you're just... She slid the phone across the table. Explain this. Ben frowned and picked up the phone. His expression changed as he zoomed in on the figure in the photo. Jesus. Emily leaned closer. It's real. Ben handed the phone back. Then what are we supposed to do? Call security and tell them there's a ghost murdering our patients? We figure out what it is, Emily said, where it came from. Ben shook his head. You think it's a ghost? I think it's worse. Julia appeared in the doorway. Her usually calm face was drawn and pale. You guys need to come to room 413. Now. Room 413. Emily entered the room to find Dr. Patel standing by the bed, looking grim. A young woman named Lisa Caldwell lay in the bed, her skin gray and waxy. Her heart monitor beeped steadily, but her breathing was shallow. Lisa's oxygen levels are crashing, Dr. Patel said, but there's no underlying reason for it. No lung damage, no obstruction. Emily's gaze shifted toward the window. The hallway beyond was empty. You saw him, didn't you? Julia whispered. Emily turned toward her. What? You think this is him? Yes, Dr. Patel sighed. Emily, this is a medical condition. No, it's not, Emily snapped. She's healthy. There's no reason for her vitals to be dropping. The lights flickered. Everyone turned toward the ceiling. The lights dimmed further. Lisa's breathing grew more labored. I need the crash cart. Patel yelled. Julia ran out of the room. Emily stepped toward the bed. Lisa, can you hear me? Lisa's eyes fluttered open. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. And then her gaze shifted past Emily. Emily turned toward the window. The plague doctor stood just beyond the glass. Ben's breath hitched. Oh my God. The doctor raised a hand, gloved fingers pointing toward Lisa. Stop, Emily screamed, running to the door. She flung it open and ran into the hallway. But the figure was gone. A choking sound came from inside the room. Emily whirled around just in time to see Lisa's body arch violently, her mouth opening wide as if gasping for air. Dark vapor leaked from her mouth-thin tendrils, a black smoke that coiled toward the ceiling. Lisa's heart monitor flatlined. She's coding, Patel shouted. Ben jumped to the bed, starting compressions. Julia arrived with the crash cart. Clear. The defibrillator charged. Clear. Ben shocked Lisa's body. Her back arched. The heart monitor beeped once, then went flat again. Patel cursed under his breath. Again. They shocked her a second time. No response. The dark mist floated toward the ceiling and dissolved into the air. Emily saw him again, standing in the hallway, watching. The research. After Lisa's death, Emily couldn't sit still. She spent the next 4 hours in the staff lounge, poring over medical reports, security footage, and patient records. She didn't understand how it all connected, only that it did. Ben eventually sat down across from her. He handed her a cup of coffee. You're working too hard, he said. Emily shook her head. I'm not stopping until I figure this out. Ben's eyes soft. You know, I've worked in a lot of hospitals, seen a lot of death, but this feels different. It's not death, Emily whispered. It's feeding. Ben frowned. What are you talking about? Emily turned her laptop toward him. I started looking into the history of St. Augustine Memorial. It was founded in 1857. Back then, it was a sanatorium used for treating patients during the smallpox epidemic. Ben's face paled. Smallpox? Yeah, Emily pulled up an article. And get this, there are records of strange deaths. Patients who recovered from smallpox would suddenly deteriorate and die overnight. Witnesses reported seeing strange figures walking through the halls, dressed in black, wearing plague masks. Ben's face darkened. The plague doctor, Emily nodded. I think whatever it is, it's tied to the hospital itself. Maybe it's some kind of curse, or maybe it's alive. Ben sat back. So how do we stop it? Emily stared at the screen. I don't know yet. Julia poked her head into the room. Hey, you guys need to see this. The hallway. Julia led them to the west wing. I saw him, Julia whispered. Emily tensed. Where? Julia pointed toward the security camera at the end of the hallway. They all crowded around the monitor. Julia rewound the footage. The hallway was empty then. Suddenly, the plague doctor appeared. He walked slowly toward a patient room. Room 417. Emily's stomach turned to ice. That's where Mr. Kelly is, Julia whispered. On the monitor, the figure reached out and touched the door handle. The camera cut out. Let's go, Emily yelled. They ran toward room 417. Emily pushed open the door. Mr. Kelly was sitting upright in bed, gasping for breath. His veins were turning black under his skin. Emily ran to the bed. Mr. Kelly. His eyes rolled back. His mouth opened. Dark vapor curled from his lips. Where is it? Ben shouted. Emily turned toward the window. The plague doctor stood just beyond the glass. Emily's jaw tightened. No, she whispered. The figure tilted its head as though studying her. Emily reached for the door handle, but it was locked. Mr. Kelly let out a ragged gasp. Emily turned toward the window. The doctor was inside the room now. No, Emily screamed. The figure leaned over Mr. Kelly's body and placed a hand on his chest. Mr. Kelly's body seized. His mouth opened wide, and his heart monitor flatlined. Emily rushed toward the figure. Stop. The plague doctor lifted its mask. There was nothing beneath it, only darkness. And then he vanished. Emily stood frozen as Mr. Kelly's body went still. She stared at the empty air where the figure had been. This isn't over, Emily whispered. Ben put a hand on her shoulder. It's only just beginning, she said. Emily didn't sleep that night. How could she? She sat alone in the staff lounge, nursing a cold cup of coffee, her mind racing. 3 patients were dead. She could feel the weight of their loss pressing down on her chest. Mr. Hanley, Mrs. Lanning, Mr. Kelly, all gone? And the plague doctor? She couldn't get the image of him out of her mind, that long-beaked mask, those dark, empty eyes beneath it. And the way he had touched Mr. Kelly's chest, draining the very life from him as if it was his right. Emily? She turned to see Ben standing in the doorway, his hair tousled and his eyes bloodshot. He hadn't slept either. You need to rest, Ben said, stepping toward her. Emily shook her head. I can't. He's going to keep killing until we stop him. Ben rubbed his face, sitting down across from her. You say that like we know how to stop him. Emily pulled out her laptop and flipped it open. I've been digging into the hospital's records, looking for patterns. Ben leaned forward. And? Emily turned the screen toward him. Every death is connected. On the screen were old medical records dating back over a century. Death certificates, autopsy reports, patient files. The first recorded deaths were in 1863, Emily explained. The hospital was being used to treat smallpox patients. But some of the ones who were recovering started dying overnight. sudden cardiac failure. Like Mr. Kelly, Ben said. Emily nodded. And then it happened again in the 1920s during the Spanish flu outbreak. Then again in the 1940s, the deaths would come in clusters, always during a major health crisis. Ben's eyes widened. You think he's feeding on the sick? Yes, Emily said, but not just the sick. He's targeting people who are recovering. Ben's face darkened. Why? Emily scrolled down. Because when they survive, they weaken him. Ben leaned closer. What are you talking about? Emily clicked on a document. An old newspaper article from 1858. The headline read, Plague doctor found dead in hospital after trying to save patients. The plague doctor was real, Emily said. He was an actual doctor who worked here during the smallpox outbreak. His name was Dr. Elias Crowley. Ben's eyebrows shot up. Crowley, as in Crowley Wing? Emily nodded. The oldest part of the hospital is named after him. Ben sat back. So, he tried to save people, and now he's... What? Cursed? Emily's voice lowered. I think it's worse than that. Ben's eyes narrowed. How? Emily scrolled further down the article. Dr. Crowley wasn't just treating patients. He was experimenting on them. He believed he could create immunity to disease by transferring the life force from healthy patients to sick ones. But it didn't work. The sick patients died and the healthy ones began wasting away. Ben's face paled. He was killing them? Emily nodded grimly. The hospital staff tried to stop him when they found out. The story goes that they cornered him in the operating room, beat him to death with surgical instruments. Ben shuddered. Jesus. But he didn't die, Emily whispered. Not completely. Whatever ritual he was performing, it worked. He didn't create immunity. He created a vessel, a way for him to live beyond death. Ben's voice was quiet. So now he's feeding off the life force of patients to sustain himself. Emily nodded, and he's getting stronger. Ben stood. Then we have to stop him. Emily shook her head. We can't. We don't know how. Ben's jaw tightened. Then we figure it out. The forgotten wing. The Crowley wing had been closed for decades. It was the oldest part of the hospital, a dark, crumbling hallway on the top floor. Most of the rooms were boarded up. No one worked there. No one even talked about it. Julia met them outside the locked doors. You're sure about this? Julia asked. Emily nodded. It started here. We need to know why. Julia pulled out a key card. Security's going to kill me if they find out I opened this wing. Ben's hand tightened on the crowbar he was holding. If we don't figure this out, no one's going to be alive to care. Julia swiped the key card. The lock beeped. The door creaked open. Emily stepped inside. The air was freezing. The smell of mildew and rot clung to the walls. Cobwebs stretched across the ceiling. Ben flicked on his flashlight. This place looks like a tomb. Emily shivered. That's because it is. They walked down the hallway, passing old patient rooms with shattered windows and rusted bed frames. Where's the operating room? Emily asked. Julia pointed down the hall. At the end, they reached a pair of double doors. Operating Theater C was etched into the metal. Emily pushed the doors open. The room was vast and circular, with rows of rusted surgical tables beneath a cracked glass skylight. Metal instruments lay scattered across the floor. A single old gurney sat in the center of the room, covered with a dirty sheet. Emily's breath hitched. "This is where they killed him," she whispered. Ben approached the gurney. He hesitated, then lifted the sheet. Beneath it lay a decayed corpse wearing a black coat and a long, beaked mask. Julia's breath caught. "Oh my God!" Emily stared down at the body. The mask was cracked and blackened, the robes shredded. The chest cavity had been crushed inward. Ben's hand hovered over the mask. "Do you think?" The corpse's hand twitched. Ben jumped back. The body sat upright. Darkness flooded the room. Emily heard Julia scream, and then the lights exploded. The darkness. Emily woke up on the floor, gasping. The operating room was dark. Ben and Julia were gone. She sat up, her heart hammering. Ben? Julia? No answer. A faint scratching sound came from the corner of the room. Emily turned toward it. The plague doctor was standing there, his head cocked to one side. "No," Emily whispered. He stepped toward her. Emily scrambled back. "Where are they?" The figure's mask tilted. "Gone? Where?" Emily shouted. "They belong to me now." Emily's chest heaved. "Give them back." The doctor reached toward her. His hand passed through her shoulder. And suddenly, Emily was no longer in the hospital. She was standing in the courtyard of the old sanatorium. Patients shuffled through the snow, their faces blank and lifeless. Orderlies in black uniforms pushed gurneys toward the morgue. She looked down at her hands. She was wearing a nurse's uniform. A man in a long coat stood at the center of the courtyard. His face was hidden behind a white mask. Dr. Crowley. "Emily," he said softly, "come now. Your place is with us." Emily took a step back. "No." Crowley's hand shot forward and grabbed her wrist. "You already belong to me." Emily screamed. And suddenly she was back in the operating room. Crowley's mask was inches from her face. "You cannot stop me," he whispered. "But you can join me." Emily's eyes flashed. Her hand shot out and ripped the mask from his face. For a single moment she saw Crowley's true face. It was hollow empty. A swirling void of darkness. Crowley screamed and collapsed to the floor. Emily stood over him. "Not yet," she said. Emily stood frozen in the center of the operating room. Dr. Crowley lay on the cold, cracked floor beneath her, his mask torn away. His face, if you could call it that, was nothing but a swirling black void. A hole where a soul should have been. The darkness beneath the mask pulsed, spreading tendrils of shadow across the floor like smoke. The blackness curled toward her feet, searching for purchase, searching for a way to regain its strength. Emily's heart hammered in her chest. Her breath came in short, sharp bursts, and then Crowley's body twitched. A hand shot up and gripped her ankle. Emily gasped as ice spread through her veins, cold and sharp. Her legs buckled beneath her, and she fell to her knees. "Join us," Crowley whispered. His voice was soft, echoing inside her skull. "Let go of the pain. Let go of the fear." She could feel her strength draining away. Her skin grew cold. Her vision blurred at the edges. "Emily," she heard Ben's voice. Somewhere in the dark, he was fighting his way toward her. Emily, fight it. Crowley's grip tightened. His hollow face leaned closer, the black void widening beneath the cracked porcelain edges of the mask. Emily's hand shot out. Her fingers closed around a jagged piece of metal that had broken off the operating table. Crowley's shadowed eyes widened. "No," he hissed. Emily gritted her teeth and drove the shard of metal into his chest. Crowley screamed. The sound was piercing, a terrible, unearthly shriek that reverberated through the walls of the operating room. The darkness writhed and pulsed around him, recoiling from the metal like it was poisoned. The black tendrils curled back toward his body. His hollow face twisted in rage and agony. Emily forced herself to her feet, yanking the metal free as Crowley collapsed to his knees. "You can't kill me," he hissed. "You will join me." "Not today," Emily said. She raised the shard of metal over her head. Crowley's form began to unravel, the darkness splitting apart into curling ribbons of shadow. He reached toward her one last time. Emily drove the metal into his face. Crowley let out a final, terrible scream and exploded into a cloud of dark mist. The mist swept across the room in a violent rush before it vanished into nothing. Emily stumbled backward, gasping for breath. Her knees gave out beneath her, and she collapsed to the floor. It was over. The aftermath. Emily woke to the sound of voices. Her head pounded. Her body ached. She opened her eyes and found herself lying in a hospital bed. Ben was sitting at her side. His face was pale, his eyes bloodshot. He smiled weakly when he saw her awake. "Hey," Ben said softly. Emily's mouth was dry. Her voice came out as a whisper. "What happened?" Ben leaned closer. "You did it. Crowley's gone." Emily's gaze wandered around the room. She was in a different wing of the hospital. Sunlight filtered through the window. The room was warm and quiet. "How did I get here?" she asked. Ben smiled faintly. "Julia and I carried you out." Emily's breath hitched. "Julia, is she okay?" Ben nodded. "Yeah, a little banged up, but alive." Emily let out a shaky breath. "And the others?" Ben's face darkened. "The patients, the ones Crowley took, they're gone. All of them." Emily closed her eyes. A sharp wave of grief cut through her chest. "I'm sorry," Ben said. Emily shook her head. "It's not your fault." Ben hesitated. "There's something else?" Emily's eyes opened. "What?" Ben stood and pulled a small black object from his pocket. A mask. Crowley's mask. Ben held it out. "We found it in the operating room." Emily stared at it. The porcelain was cracked, dark veins running through the surface. The beak was chipped. "It's empty," Ben said, "but it's still here." Emily sat up slowly. "Burn it," she said. Ben's brow furrowed. "What?" Emily's eyes darkened. "We can't take the chance. Destroy it." Ben nodded and slipped the mask back into his pocket. Emily's hand shot out and grabbed his wrist. "No," she said. "Do it now." The fire. They stood in the hospital's back lot as Ben set the metal trash can down on the pavement. Emily watched as he pulled out the mask and dropped it inside. Ben lit a match. The small flame danced in the evening air. He tossed the match into the can. The mask ignited instantly. The flames surged unnaturally high bright blue fire, licking at the edges of the metal. Emily flinched as the mask began to blacken and curl. The sound it made was horrifying, a screeching wail that echoed through the night air. Ben stepped back. Jesus. Emily's eyes remained fixed on the flames. The mask cracked and crumbled, breaking apart into ash. The sound faded, and then it was gone. Emily let out a slow breath. "Is it over?" Ben asked. Emily wasn't sure how to answer that. 2 weeks later, Emily sat at the nurse's station, flipping through patient files. Things had gone back to normal, at least on the surface. The hospital was still standing. The patients were recovering. The staff had started talking about the strange events, but most chalked it up to stress and exhaustion. No one wanted to admit what really happened. Emily couldn't blame them. Ben appeared at her side. "You okay?" Emily smiled faintly. "Getting there." Ben leaned on the counter. "I still can't believe we survived that." "Yeah," Emily said. Ben hesitated. "Do you think it's really over?" Emily's eyes darkened. "I don't know." Ben glanced down the hallway. "Well, if it's not, we'll handle it." Emily smiled. "Yeah, we will." Ben's eyes softened. "You want to get some coffee?" Emily's smile widened. "Yeah, let me finish this." Ben left, and Emily turned back to the files. The station was quiet. The sound of distant voices drifted through the hallways. And then a sound, soft, faint, the slow, deliberate sound of footsteps echoing down the hallway. Emily's breath hitched. She turned toward the sound. A figure stood at the end of the hallway, partially hidden in the shadows. Tall, thin, wearing a long black coat, a white mask covering his face. Emily's heart hammered in her chest. "Ben?" she called out. The figure stepped toward her. Emily blinked, and it was gone. Her breath shuddered in her throat. Her hands tightened on the file. Slowly she stood and walked toward the hallway. The sound of footsteps followed her into the dark. It was supposed to be the start of something new, a fresh chapter. That's what Andrew and Claire kept telling themselves as they stood in front of the old house, keys in hand. The bones beneath the floor. The place was a steel, a 4-bedroom Victorian-style house with a wraparound porch and a massive backyard, all for a fraction of the market price. Too good to be true, really, but the realtor insisted the owners just wanted to sell fast. Claire stood at the edge of the driveway, arms crossed, biting her lip as she stared at the peeling white paint and the sagging shutters. "It's charming," she said, her tone making it clear she wasn't entirely convinced. Andrew chuckled, unlocking the front door. "It's got potential." The front door creaked open into a grand foyer. High ceilings, crown molding. A huge chandelier, dusty but still impressive, hung above them. Sunlight filtered through stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns across the polished wood floor. "See?" Andrew said. "Potential." Claire sighed, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "It's creepy. That's just because it's old." Andrew walked deeper into the house, running his hand over the banister of the curved staircase. "Besides, a little work in this place could be amazing." Claire followed reluctantly. her eyes drifting toward the dark corners of the house. The air was thick with the scent of old wood and mildew. The sound of their footsteps echoed faintly through the empty halls. They spent the rest of the afternoon unpacking. Andrew focused on getting the kitchen set up while Claire tackled the upstairs bedroom. She tried to ignore the occasional creaking noise coming from the walls, telling herself it was just the house settling. That night, they had dinner on the floor in the living room, take-out containers spread between them. The room was lit only by candlelight, since the old electrical wiring meant only a few of the lights worked. "This is kind of romantic," Andrew said, handing her a glass of wine. Claire smiled. "Yeah, kind of." As the night deepened, the wind picked up outside, rattling the windows. The house creaked and groaned in response. Claire curled up against Andrew's side, feeling the chill of the house even beneath the thick blanket. "You think this place is haunted?" Claire joked. Andrew smirked. "If it is, maybe we'll get lucky, and they'll help with the renovations." They both laughed, but the sound felt thin and hollow against the heavy silence that followed. They went to bed early, but sleep didn't come easy for Claire. The sounds of the house, the distant thumps, the scratching noises in the walls, kept her awake. At one point she swore she heard a whisper. At 3:17 of May, she sat bolt upright in bed. A sharp noise echoed through the house, like something heavy shifting beneath the floor. Andrew stirred beside her. "What is it?" Claire strained to listen. There was another noise, a low scraping sound beneath the floorboards. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. Andrew sat up, rubbing his face. "It's probably rats." "That's not rats." Andrew sighed and got out of bed. "I'll go check it out." Claire followed him downstairs, wrapping herself in a robe. Andrew grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer and started tapping the floorboards. The sound happened again, louder this time. A deep, hollow thunk beneath their feet. Andrew crouched down and knocked on the wood. "There's a space under here." Claire's eyes widened. "A crawl space?" Andrew traced his hand along the floor and stopped when his fingers brushed against something. "A seam." His eyes narrowed. "Help me move the rug." They shoved aside the old, dusty area rug to reveal a square outline in the wood. A handle protruded from the center. "What the hell?" Andrew muttered. He tugged on the handle. The wood groaned as a section of the floor lifted, revealing a dark hole beneath. A rotting wooden ladder descended into the blackness below. A gust of cool air swept upward, carrying the scent of damp earth and something else. "Holy shit," Andrew whispered. Claire covered her mouth. "How did we not see this before?" Andrew shone the flashlight down into the hole. Rough stone walls descended into darkness. A low tunnel extended beyond the range of the light. Andrew started down the ladder. "Wait, what are you doing?" Claire hissed. "We have to see what's down there. Or we could not see what's down there." Andrew climbed down. Claire cursed under her breath and followed him. The tunnel was narrow, barely wide enough for them to walk side by side. The walls were lined with jagged stone, slick with moisture. Roots curled through the cracks in the ceiling. The air was cold and wet. Andrew swept the flashlight ahead, illuminating the narrow corridor. "Jesus, this is old." Claire shivered. "It's probably part of the foundation." "No, This was deeper than a normal foundation. They rounded a bend and froze. A pile of bones lay ahead of them, stacked haphazardly in the center of the tunnel. Human bones, rib cages, skulls. The flashlight beam reflected off dark, dried stains on the stone floor. "Oh my God," Claire gasped. Andrew knelt down. These are old. Decades at least. A noise echoed from deeper down the tunnel, the sound of footsteps approaching. Claire grabbed Andrew's arm. "Did you hear that?" Andrew stood, aiming the flashlight down the tunnel. "Hello?" Silence. Then the sound of breathing, low and wet, drifted toward them. Andrew took a step forward. Claire yanked him back. "We need to leave, now." Andrew hesitated, but then the breathing sound grew louder and closer. From the darkness a figure emerged, hunched and thin. Its skin was pale and stretched tightly over sharp bones. Its eyes gleamed in the dark, reflecting the beam of the flashlight. "What the—" Andrew whispered. The figure stepped forward, and the light revealed more details. A mouth full of jagged teeth, fingers that ended in blackened claws. "Run!" Claire screamed. Andrew turned and sprinted back down the tunnel, Claire right behind him. The creature hissed and lunged after them, its claws scraping against the stone walls. Claire stumbled, but Andrew grabbed her hand and pulled her to her feet. They reached the ladder. Andrew climbed first, Claire following close behind. The creature's claws scratched against the ladder's wood, shaking it. Claire screamed as Andrew grabbed her wrist and yanked her up through the trapdoor. They slammed the door shut. Andrew dragged the rug over it and collapsed, gasping for breath. Claire sat back, clutching her knees to her chest. "What the hell was that?" Andrew whispered. Claire shook her head, tears streaking her cheeks. "I don't know, but I think it's still down there." From beneath the floor, they heard a single sharp scratch, followed by a low, hungry growl. Claire sat at the edge of the couch, knees pulled to her chest, her eyes glued to the floor. Andrew paced the living room, running his hand through his hair over and over again. The trapdoor was still covered by the rug, but they could both hear it. That low, scraping noise, slow and deliberate. Claw against wood. "Okay," Andrew said, breathing hard. We have to call someone." "Call who?" Claire snapped. "What are we supposed to say?" "Hey, there's a monster in our basement. Can you come get it?" Andrew rubbed his face. "The police. And tell them what? They'll think we're crazy." Andrew sat down heavily beside her. Claire stared at the floor, her hand pressed to her mouth. The scratching stopped for a moment, then a single knock, slow, rhythmic, 3 beats. Claire flinched. Andrew stiffened. "Did it just knock?" Claire whispered. Andrew stood and grabbed the flashlight. "What are you doing?" Claire hissed. Andrew pulled the rug back, revealing the trapdoor. The knock came again, louder this time. "Andrew, don't." He crouched down and pressed his ear to the wood. For a moment there was nothing but silence. Then, "Let me out." Andrew jumped back. Claire screamed, clutching her chest. "Did you hear that?" Andrew gasped. Claire shook her head. That wasn't real." "Let me out," the voice said again, clearer this time. A man's voice, weak and pleading. "Please, Help me." Andrew's eyes widened. It's a person." "No." Claire backed away. "No, we saw it, Andrew. That wasn't a person." "But what if it is?" Andrew crouched down again. "What if someone's trapped down there? We are not opening that door." Andrew hesitated. The voice came again, more desperate this time. "I'm hurt," it said. "Please, I'm bleeding." Andrew looked at Claire. His hand moved toward the latch. Claire lunged forward and slapped his hand away. "No." Andrew stood, his hands trembling. He turned away from the trapdoor and started pacing. Claire pressed her back against the wall, trembling. "We have to know what's down there," Andrew said. "No, we don't," Claire shot back. "We can board it up, seal it, burn it if we have to." Andrew shook his head. "We can't just leave it." "Why not?" A sharp knock cut through the air, so loud it made them both flinch. Then the voice came again, but this time it wasn't weak. It wasn't desperate. "I know you're there. Let me out." Claire covered her mouth. Andrew took a shaky step back. "We need to leave," Claire said. "We can't." "What do you mean, we can't?" Andrew took a breath, his face pale. "Because I think, whatever it is, I think it's been here a long time, and I don't think it's going to let us leave." Claire stared at him. "What the hell are you talking about?" Andrew turned toward the window. "When we were down there, did you notice the bones?" "What about them?" Andrew's jaw tightened. Some of them weren't old. Claire's breath hitched. "And that voice," Andrew continued, "it didn't sound like it was in pain. It sounded calm." A sudden noise made them both jump, the sound of the back door slamming open. Andrew grabbed the flashlight. "What was that?" Claire shook her head, too afraid to speak. Andrew moved toward the kitchen. "Stay here." Claire grabbed his arm. "Andrew, no. Just stay here." Claire stood frozen as Andrew disappeared into the kitchen. She heard the back door creak open, and then silence. "Andrew?" she called. Nothing. She took a hesitant step forward. "Andrew?" A floorboard creaked behind her. Claire spun around. A man stood in the hallway, tall, gaunt, dressed in old clothes stained with dirt and something darker. His face was pale, his eyes hollow. Claire stumbled back. Who are you?" The man smiled faintly. His eyes glinted darkly in the dim light. "I used to live here," he said softly. Claire's mouth went dry. You can't be here." "I heard you found the basement." Claire's heart hammered in her chest. The man took a step forward. "Stay away." "I'm not here to hurt you," the man said, "but they are." Claire's back hit the wall. "Who?" she whispered. The man's smile widened. "You let them out?" Claire's hands trembled. "No, we closed it." "Yes." The man's eyes darkened. "But they don't need a door anymore." Suddenly, Andrew screamed from the kitchen. "Andrew!" Claire ran toward the sound. She found Andrew in the corner of the kitchen, clutching his leg. Blood seeped through his jeans. His face was pale and his eyes wide. "What happened?" Claire cried, dropping to his side. I don't know," Andrew gasped. "Something grabbed me." Claire pulled his pant leg up. Deep gouges were carved into his calf, as though something with claws had raked through the flesh. A noise sounded behind them, the sound of dragging footsteps. Claire turned toward the hallway. The man was gone. Another sound, a whispering noise. Claire grabbed Andrew's arm and hauled him to his feet. "We need to leave, now." They stumbled toward the front door, but it wouldn't budge. Claire yanked on the handle, but it felt like it was cemented shut. A noise sounded behind them, the sound of dragging footsteps. Claire turned toward the hallway. The man was gone. Another sound, a whispering noise. "Why isn't it opening?" Claire screamed. Andrew's eyes were wide. "The house, it doesn't want us to leave." A shadow passed over the stained glass windows, a long, thin shape. Suddenly the trapdoor in the floor slammed open. A noise sounded behind them, the sound of dragging footsteps. Claire turned toward the hallway. The man was gone. Another sound, a whispering noise. "Why isn't it opening?" Claire screamed. Andrew's eyes were wide. "The house, it doesn't want us to leave." A shadow passed over the stained glass windows, a long, thin shape. Suddenly, the trapdoor in the floor slammed open. A noise sounded behind them, the sound of dragging footsteps. Claire turned toward the hallway. The man was gone. Another sound, a whispering noise. The cold air blasted through the room. From the dark hole beneath the floor, the sound of footsteps echoed upward. And then they saw it. It crawled up from the darkness on spindly limbs. Pale, stretched skin over sharp bones. Its face was hollow, dark sockets where eyes should have been. Its mouth twisted unnaturally into a jagged smile. Andrew screamed. Claire yanked him toward the back door. The cold air lasted through the room. From the dark hole beneath the floor, the sound of footsteps echoed upward. And then they saw it. It crawled up from the darkness on spindly limbs. "It's coming." They slammed into the door. It opened this time, and they stumbled into the backyard. Andrew collapsed onto the grass. Claire dropped beside him, her chest heaving. The house behind them stood silent. The trapdoor was closed again. The windows were dark. Claire clutched Andrew's hand. "What the hell was that?" Andrew whispered. Claire shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know," she said. From inside the house, the sound of a single knock echoed through the floorboards. Slow, rhythmic, 3 beats. Claire sat cross-legged on the floor of the hotel room, her hands gripping a mug of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. Andrew was lying on the bed, his leg wrapped in thick gauze. His breathing was steady, but he was pale and clammy. The doctors at the emergency room had stitched him up, but the wounds were strange, jagged, and too precise, almost as if they had been made with surgical tools instead of claws. "I don't understand," Claire whispered. Her voice was hoarse from crying. How could any of this be real? Andrew opened his eyes. "It's not just real," he said weakly. "It's old." Claire frowned. "What do you mean?" Andrew sat up with a wince, rubbing his temple. "When we were down there, I saw carvings on the walls. They weren't random. They were symbols." Claire's eyes narrowed. "What kind of symbols?" Andrew's jaw tightened. "Ritual symbols." Claire's stomach twisted. Ritual for what? Andrew hesitated. Then he pulled his phone from the nightstand and opened his notes app. He showed Claire a series of hastily scrawled drawings, strange runes and spirals. I copied them before we left, Andrew said. Claire's hands trembled as she scrolled through the images. The symbols were disturbing, harsh, jagged shapes interwoven with dark, circular patterns. You shouldn't have done that, a voice said from the corner of the room. Claire and Andrew jumped. The man was standing there, dressed in the same dirty clothes as before. His face was thin, almost skeletal, his eyes dark pits in his pale face. How did you get in here? Claire gasped. The man's eyes were calm. You let me in. Claire stood up, backing toward the door. Andrew sat up, his face white. What do you mean? Claire demanded. The man smiled faintly. You opened the trapdoor. That was enough. What the hell is down there? Andrew asked. The man's smile widened. The house was built over it, over the network. Network? Claire whispered. How did you get in here? Claire gasped. The man's eyes were calm. You let me in. Claire stood up, backing toward the door. Andrew sat up, his face white. What do you mean? Claire demanded. Old tunnels, the man said. Older than the house. Older than the town. People have lived above them for centuries. But most didn't survive long. Claire's heart hammered in her chest. What's down there? Andrew repeated. The man's expression darkened. Not what? Who? Claire shook her head. No, that thing was not human. It was once, the man said. His eyes glinted in the dim light. Long ago. Andrew clenched his jaw. We need to leave. We need to get as far away from that house as possible. The man's smile widened. You think you can? Claire's chest tightened. Andrew swung his legs over the edge of the bed. We got out once. We'll do it again. The man tilted his head. Did you? Andrew froze. Claire's eyes widened. What do you mean? The man took a step toward them. You think you left the house, but tell me this. Have you seen anyone since you escaped? Claire's mouth opened to argue, but then her blood went cold. The drive to the hospital, the hotel, the emergency room, it had been empty. No cars on the road, no people in the hallways. Even the doctors had spoken with strange, clipped voices. No background noise, no beeping machines. Where are we? Claire whispered. The man smiled. The house doesn't let you leave. Claire stumbled back. That's impossible. Andrew grabbed Claire's hand. We need to go. Claire shook her head. We have to find someone. There's no one to find, the man said calmly. Andrew pulled Claire toward the door. Leaving won't work, the man called after them. Andrew didn't stop. He yanked open the door and pulled Claire into the hallway, and froze. The hallway was wrong. The walls were peeling. The light fixtures flickered. The carpet beneath their feet was stained with something dark. It wasn't the hallway of a hotel. It was the house. Claire's breath hitched. No. Andrew's grip on her hand tightened. We're not in the hotel. A long, slow creak sounded behind them. Claire and Andrew turned toward the sound. At the end of the hallway, the trapdoor was standing open, and from the dark beneath it, the sound of footsteps. "Oh my God," Claire whispered. Andrew pulled her back toward the room. "Run." They sprinted down the hallway, their feet pounding against the floor. Claire's breath came in ragged gasps. The trapdoor slammed shut behind them. The sound echoed unnaturally through the hall. Claire shoved open the door to the room and slammed it behind them. Andrew shoved a chair under the doorknob. Claire's back pressed to the door. "What the hell is happening?" Claire gasped. Andrew's hand trembled as he pressed his back against the wall. "We never left," he said. Claire's eyes widened. "The house? It made us think we left," Andrew whispered. A single knock came from the door. Then another. Then another. Claire swallowed hard. "What do we do?" Andrew closed his eyes. "We need to go back down there." Claire shook her head violently. "Are you insane?" Andrew opened his eyes. They were dark and hollow. "There's something down there," Andrew said, "and I think it's waiting for us." Claire's hands shook. A loud scraping noise sounded from the door, as though something long and sharp was dragging down the wood. Andrew stood. "Come on." Claire's hand shot out and grabbed his arm. "Andrew, no, we can't keep running," Andrew said. His voice was calm. "We have to face it." Claire's breath hitched. Andrew stepped toward the door and pulled the chair away. "Andrew, wait." Andrew opened the door. A figure stood in the hallway. Tall, thin, its limbs were too long, and its head was tilted unnaturally to the side. Its face was featureless, except for a long, crooked smile. Andrew's breath hitched. The figure took a single step toward him. Andrew slammed the door shut and turned to Claire. "We need to move. Now." Claire followed Andrew to the window. Andrew shoved it open. Claire swung her leg over the windowsill. But then Andrew screamed. She turned and saw the figure standing right behind him. It grabbed Andrew's arm and yanked him backward. "Andrew!" Claire lunged forward. Andrew's hand reached toward her. "Claire!" Claire grabbed his wrist. "Don't let go." Andrew's eyes widened. His mouth opened. A second hand shot out of the darkness and grabbed his other arm. Andrew screamed as he was pulled backward into the darkness. Claire screamed. Andrew's hand slipped from her fingers. Claire stumbled backward, sobbing. The figure's smile widened. The window slammed shut. Claire screamed and pounded her fists against the glass. But Andrew was gone, and Claire was alone. A soft knock sounded behind her. Slow, rhythmic, 3 beats. Claire's breath hitched. And then the sound of the trapdoor creaking open once again. Claire's back hit the wall. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps as the trapdoor's creaking filled the room. The sound echoed unnaturally through the walls, a low groaning noise like the house itself was waking up. "Andrew," she whispered, tears burning her eyes. "No, please." From the trapdoor, the sound of footsteps rose, slow, deliberate, heavy. Claire's hands trembled as she backed toward the window. Her heart hammered painfully in her chest. The window was still locked. She spun toward the door and grabbed the handle. It wouldn't budge. No. The footsteps grew louder. Claire's hands fumbled at the window's latch. Suddenly the temperature in the room dropped. Her breath fogged the air. Then she heard it. Andrew's voice. Claire. Her hands froze. Claire spun around toward the trapdoor. Andrew's face was visible just beyond the threshold, his eyes wide and desperate. Andrew, she cried, running toward him. Help me, he begged. Please, it's so dark down here. Claire fell to her knees at the edge of the trapdoor, reaching toward him. I've got you, she shouted. Andrew reached toward her. His hand was shaking. Their fingers touched. Then Claire hesitated. Andrew's eyes. They were wrong. The pupils were too large, swallowing most of the irises. His skin was too pale, almost waxy. And his expression, the fear was there, but beneath it, there was a smile. Claire, Andrew whispered. Please. Claire's breath hitched. Andrew's hand tightened around her wrist. She gasped. Andrew, you're hurting me. His mouth twisted into a cruel smile. Come down here, he whispered. It's warm. Claire yanked her hand back, but Andrew's grip was iron. Let go. She screamed. Andrew's eyes turned completely black. His smile widened, twisting unnaturally. Join U.S. Claire screamed as Andrew's hand pulled her toward the trapdoor. Her other hand scrabbled at the floorboards, her nails breaking as she tried to gain traction. You said you wouldn't leave me, Andrew's voice hissed, but now it was layered, his voice overlaid with something deeper, something ancient. Claire. Claire's eyes widened. Andrew's real voice, thin, desperate, echoed from somewhere below the trapdoor. Claire, don't listen to it. Claire's breath hitched. The creature's mouth widened unnaturally, splitting from cheek to cheek. No, Claire screamed. She raised her foot and kicked Andrew's hand away. The creature hissed and withdrew into the darkness. Claire rolled onto her back, gasping for breath. The trapdoor began to close. Claire's hand shot out and grabbed it just before it shut completely. I'm coming, she gasped. She forced it open. Cold air blasted upward. The stench of damp earth and rot filled the room. Claire grabbed a flashlight and a kitchen knife from the floor. She slid her legs into the opening. Claire. Andrew's real voice echoed weakly from the depths. Claire climbed down into the darkness. Claire descended the ladder into the tunnels. The air was freezing, and moisture clung to the rough stone walls. Her flashlight's beam wavered as her hands trembled. Andrew? She called. Her voice echoed down the tunnel. A sharp scraping noise sounded behind her. Claire spun, raising the flashlight. Nothing. Come on, she whispered to herself. Keep going. She moved deeper into the tunnel. The stone walls narrowed. Jagged carvings, the same symbols Andrew had copied earlier, were etched into the rock. Whispers rose from the dark. Claire's breath hitched. Shapes were shifting in the shadows. Thin, elongated figures with hollow eyes. She kept moving. The whispers grew louder. Then Claire saw it, a flicker of movement at the edge of her light. She followed it. Andrew was sitting at the edge of a dark pool of water. Andrew. Claire rushed toward him, but then stopped short. Andrew's head tilted toward her, but his expression was strange. His mouth hung open unnaturally wide. His eyes were glassy. "Claire," he said, but his voice didn't match the movement of his mouth. "No," Claire whispered. The thing that looked like Andrew smiled. "You found me." A hand shot out of the water and grabbed Claire's ankle. She screamed as she was pulled toward the pool. Another hand grabbed her other ankle. Andrew's real voice screamed, "Claire, don't let them take you." Claire's hand shot toward the flashlight and smashed it against the hand, pulling her down. The hand released her. Claire stumbled backward, gasping. From the dark pool, a figure emerged. It was Andrew, but not Andrew, pale, hollowed out. The symbols on his arms were glowing faintly. His eyes were dead. Claire screamed and raised the knife. "Stop," Andrew's voice whispered. Claire froze. Andrew's hand shot toward her neck and squeezed. Claire's feet kicked helplessly. His eyes darkened. "You shouldn't have come down here," he said. Claire's vision blurred. Her strength was fading. "I know. You're still in there," she choked. For a moment, Andrew's eyes softened. The grip on her neck loosened. Claire raised the knife and stabbed Andrew in the shoulder. Andrew screamed. Claire shoved him backward into the pool. The creature screamed as Andrew's body sank beneath the surface. Claire gasped and stumbled backward. The pool went still. Andrew's face appeared just beneath the surface. For a single moment, his eyes were calm. Claire's breath hitched. Andrew smiled faintly. Then he sank into the dark. Claire's scream tore through the tunnel. Claire stumbled through the tunnel, her legs weak and trembling. Behind her, the whispers were growing louder again. She reached the ladder and scrambled upward. She pulled herself into the room and slammed the trapdoor shut. The whispers stopped. Claire collapsed onto the floor. The house was silent. Days passed. Claire sat on the floor of her old bedroom in her parents' house. The symbols were still burned into her mind. The memory of Andrew's face beneath the water haunted her every time she closed her eyes. A knock came at the door. Claire opened it. It was the old man. "You survived," he said calmly. Claire's jaw clenched. "What was down there?" she demanded. The old man smiled faintly. "The house isn't cursed," he said. "The land beneath it is." Claire's stomach twisted. "It's awake now," the man whispered, "and it will need to be fed again soon." Claire's breath hitched. The old man handed her a small key. "For when it calls you back," he said. Claire's hand curled around the key. "I'm not going back," she said. The old man's smile widened. "You will," he said. "You always will." Claire closed the door. She sat on the floor, her back against the wall. Her hand tightened around the key. Outside, the wind howled, and beneath the floor, something knocked.